My sister-in-law told me the story of a chendol seller. Chendol is an iced dessert, and this seller was in a hawker stall in Penang. The person wore a rubber glove on his right hand for sanitation purposes, but the irony was he was using the same gloved hand to handle money, clean the benches, handle the food, like holding the shaved ice and packing it into the bowl. We mused at the fact he was complying to the outward appearance, but had not appreciated the reason and the value, which was to stop contamination and keep people from being sick. In the same way, we can go through the motions of being a disciple, but without the right value and heart, the result will be far from a healthy, vital, reproducing disciple. And that's why having the right discipleship values are so important to spiritual health and also to flourishing. In the same way, we don't want to produce robots that just reproduce actions or just carry out some sort of program processes. We want to reproduce disciples with the same value and heart as Jesus. From the right heart will come the right actions, and it'll come also with the right spirit. And only then will we be truly able to represent Jesus to everyone, everywhere, with everything that we have. In fact, it's as we invest in the lives of others, we also will mature and grow spiritually. To go from being just children to mature, reproducing sons and daughters of God, we will become more like Jesus. That's why one of our discipleship value is reproducibility. And we value reproducibility because healthy disciples reproduce disciples. Healthy disciples make disciples with the same heart as Jesus. The world is desperately needing the grace of God. It's through disciples of Jesus Christ that people can hear the gospel message and encounter the love and grace of God. That's what people 2,000 years ago experienced through Jesus, and today can experience as well through his body, the church, but only if we allow him to live in us and through us and help others to do the same. We see this in the life of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 to 38, Jesus expressed the need for his disciples to partner and pray for more workers, disciples. Verse 35, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. He healed every kind of disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He said to his disciples, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his fields." Jesus knew that if the gospel message was to go throughout the world, it would need more than one person. Jesus' ministry on earth was twofold. Firstly, to offer his life for the salvation of mankind, and secondly, to set the foundation for a disciple-making movement that would spread through the whole world. He invested in his 12 disciples and even more in 3 of them, Peter, James, and John. And then later, the resurrected Christ would invest in the Apostle Paul. Today, we benefit from the work of the Holy Spirit through the generations of disciples that came from these few disciple makers. But how about us? Many have been in church for many years, but haven't experienced the joy of leading someone to Christ and discipling them to lead someone else to Christ and see them reproduce. We call this generational growth. It's not about putting more responsibility of making disciples on only a few, but everyone working one by one to make disciples. And this is how a disciple-making movement begins and is also sustained. Everyone is important. Everyone is needed. Everyone is called. I think in our hearts, we all want to make disciples, to reproduce and see others do the same. Sometimes it seems so hard. But the good news is that Jesus promises to make us reproducing disciples. This promise comes with Jesus' invitation to follow him. Jesus called and invited the first disciples with this promise: "Come and follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." You know, I like the story of Jesus and his disciples feeding the 5,000. It's recorded in Mark chapter 6. There was a crowd of 5,000 men and their families, and they had traveled great lengths to hear Jesus and experience him. It was late and they were hungry, and the nearest town was too far away. The disciples asked Jesus to send them away, and here Jesus astounds the disciples by commanding them to feed the people. You feed them. It was astounding because they looked only at their physical resources or lack thereof. They looked at their money they had, the food, and maybe their talents. It wasn't enough. But Jesus was getting them to look beyond the physical to the spiritual resources. The spiritual resources they had in their relationship to Him. And we today have the same resources. And what I believe is the key. Just as Jesus was dependent on the Father and the Holy Spirit, so are we to be. It is through dependency that Jesus shapes us and causes us to multiply and reproduce. I'll tell you this story. I remember a young girl in university, and her name was Hannah, and she came on a short-term mission trip to Cambodia with me. It was the very first time of going overseas, and part of it was we were carrying out a medical mission in remote villages. In one village, we asked the villagers if we could pray for them. So I invited the whole team to divide up and pray for the villagers. Hannah, with the assistance of a translator, another university-age student, prayed for a very old lady who was suffering terrible pains through her entire body. And she'd been suffering this for a very long time. But after Hannah prayed, all the pain just went. This old lady was instantly healed. And the old lady was in tears of joy, because she saw Jesus was real. And then she chose to become a follower of Jesus. But there was another old lady who saw what had happened and wanted to be prayed for healing by Hannah. But Hannah did something very unusual, at least to some, but I'm sure not to God. You see, Hannah asked the old lady who had just received Christ to pray for the other old lady. Hannah knew it wasn't her that healed, but Jesus. She also knew her role, which was to make disciples. So the old lady that just accepted Jesus needed to grow by experiencing Jesus working through her for herself. With the encouragement of Hannah, the old lady, the new spiritual-born Christian, prayed for the other old lady, and a most amazing thing happened. The other old lady was healed instantly and completely. Both ladies were in tears of joy. And the second lady became a follower of Jesus as well. 2 new generations in one day. This is what we call generational growth. It's not about age, but it's about reproducing disciples. And if I was to sum it up in a sentence, I would say this. Reproducing disciples are followers of Jesus that have learned to be independently dependent on Jesus Christ. Each new generation spiritually grows and reproduced by the power of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit within all of us who follow Jesus, the Holy Spirit within you. We can take confidence because Jesus has purposed us and blessed us to reproduce, to make disciples. Jesus gave the Great Commission in Matthew 28:19-20. And Jesus said, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all that I've commanded and I've given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So what about you? Do you see this value of reproducibility driving your life? Are you investing in the lives of others to see them grow to be independently dependent on Jesus so they can help others to do the same? Are you developing an abiding dependence on Jesus? Let's explore together how this disciple-making value drives how we become a disciple and build disciples who represent Jesus to everyone, everywhere, with everything.